decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here is a true Israelite in whom there is nothing false." And Nathanael said, "How do you know me?" "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." And Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You shall see greater things than that. I tell you this, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." The word of the Lord in the house of the Lord. The gospel's easy to preach. The one that's tough to preach is the one that Janet got to read today. Oftentimes in my 3-year cycle I just kind of missed that one. Because it gets into some subjects and a lot of the reason for the confusion on the subject is that we are looking for words out of another language that we can transfer and use English words for. And it talks about don't let yourself get involved with a prostitute, which is an easy reference mark. But what it's talking about is not that kind of sexual activity, but rather, and even though it does talk about keep yourself sexually clean and all of that kind of stuff, what it's really talking about is that we let ourselves get into perverted relationships with things. And when we do that, it touches our hearts in the same way. So it isn't a matter of not frequenting houses of ill repute or anything like that, but it's a matter of separating yourself from the orgies of the world. Now yesterday, there were 2 football games in the National Football League, and today there will be 2 more. And in each of those, there's going to be people sitting out in miserable cold, except the one in Minnesota, where it's really cold and they're indoors. And they have paid an awful price to go sit in those places, because it's what they have to do. It's a burning desire to be out there and freeze your buns while cheering for your favorite team. We get so engrossed in some things. Look at the crowds at concerts. Remember when you went to a concert and you sat there politely and you listened to the music and then you applauded, and they did an encore, you applauded some more? And now it's jump up and down and scream and shout so you can't hear the music, or shout the words so that you can't hear the singer, because we're into it and that's important to us. And that's the kind of thing that this scripture is talking about, is getting into things instead of getting into the Spirit. And he says, keep yourself clean so that God can touch your hearts. Because if you've already given your heart over to something else, God has a hard time getting a hold of it. We're obsessive about the things that we think are wonderful. I buy a new car. I think it's wonderful. You buy a better car because you think it's more wonderful, and so on and so on. We do these things because it's an obsession with us to not step back from anything. A young man in Florida who isn't yet 21, who just retired because he hit the Powerball for $539 million. Now, if I was 21, I would take the 29-year annuity option, so I couldn't blow it all at once. He's become a millionaire. But they say he's now, can't think of who, one of the rock stars. He's worth more than she is in one instant. And I only missed it by 6 numbers. If I had won it, I would not take the 29-year annuity option. But there are people who have to play it every time it's there, because it's their one chance at fame, it's their one chance at winning, it's their one chance at fame and fortune, it's I gotta do it. Since you only have one chance in 874 million to win it, I figure it's got to get over 400 million before it's worth putting $2 on. So when he gets 400 million, I'm in there. Big time. Except I usually forget that you're supposed to buy one on Wednesday too. So. You know the old story of that fellow who was in church and prayed, Lord, let me win the lottery. If I win the lottery, I'll do things for the whole community. And he didn't win the lottery. And then I think he said, Lord, let me win the lottery. I'll do things for the Jews. I'll do things for the Lutherans. I'll even do things for the Catholics if I have all that money. Didn't win. And the 3rd week when he prayed, let me win the lottery, he heard a voice that said, do your share. Buy a ticket. You're never going to win the lottery of God's love unless you invest something of yourself in that lottery. And the wonderful thing is, if you invest something in God's lottery, it's 1-to-1. You will get 1,000,000 times return for what you put in. And you never lose if you invest yourself there. So what the Scripture is talking about, and even what it's talking about in the Gospel, that God calls us to be separated. God calls us to be different. Samuel worked for Eli because his mother had dedicated him to God, because the firstborn son in Israel was always dedicated to the Lord. So Samuel, as soon as he could basically walk, was committed to service in the temple. And whoever the prophet was served that prophet. And yet he heard God's call. And what did God tell him? You go tell Eli that all those things I promised I was going to do to him, I'm going to do them. Now Samuel was a good guy, but his kids were awful. Just like most of our kids are awful. Somewhere along the line until they become wonderful. There's that minute or two in their life when you could, well, we'll go there. But that's where Samuel got called, because he was invested in what God wanted from him. And God is telling all of us through the Old Testament reading that we need to be careful about what we invest ourselves in. We need to be prudent about what we invest ourselves in. We need to be very careful about what we invest ourselves in. And that word prostitute and prostitution and all that stuff doesn't seem like it ought to be in this place. But we prostitute ourselves so often for something. We sell our soul for my new car. We sell our soul for a chance to win 500 million. We sell our soul for being able to stand in the front row at a concert and scream our lungs out because we adore whoever it is that's up there. And that's not what he wants from us. He wants us to be able to commit totally, give ourselves to him, that he might protect us from this, prostitution to things. Because what we decide we love at the moment is what owns us at the moment. And the real problem is Not that God won't forgive us for our peccadillos, or that God won't forgive us for the transgressions and the falling away. The problem is that we can't forgive ourselves. And until we can forgive ourselves for falling away, we can't ask God for His forgiveness. So it's a real tight equation that we walk. We live our lives in a secular world. We live our lives in a world of tremendous temptations. Some things beautiful and some things ugly. But everything calls out to us. It says, come. Come. Come here. And do we listen? Or do we listen when God says, follow me. Put down your nets and I'll make you fishers of men. Come now. He said, Nathanael, I saw you when you were under the palm tree before Philip called you. And Nathanael said, I can believe you now because you gave me an insight that I never had before. And that's what believing can do for each one of us. It can give to us an insight that we have never had before. It can give us a clear channel in our relationship with the God who loves us. Yeah, he said, don't do all these terrible things. If we wanted to translate it back into the original languages of Greek and Aramaic, it would have a different word, but it would mean basically the same thing. Don't let yourself get so immersed in anything that would separate you from God that you cannot overcome it. Because as he said, every time you get so deeply involved with something, you can't shed it. It owns you. You belong to it. It doesn't belong to you. The biggest house, the biggest car, the biggest diamond ring, the biggest, the best, the shiniest, the widest, the deepest, whatever. When you have a superlative like that in your life, it owns your life. You're not free to worship. You're not free to love. Because it can't love you back. So all he asks of us is do our best. He knows we're going to get hooked on something. He knows we're going to get called, bound up in certain things. But he wants us to not get so bound up that we can't step away from it. So bound up that we cannot turn our back on it. So bound up that it owns us. Because Christ doesn't want to own you. He simply wants to love you enough that you want to love him back. He doesn't want you so engrossed in him that you have no thoughts for anything else. But he wants you to be so engrossed in him that you understand how deep and how viable and how powerful his love is for you. So don't get hung up on things. People get hung up on good things too. They can't do enough for the neighbors. They can't do enough for the community. They can't do enough charity work. And there comes a point where you quit doing it because it's the right thing to do, and you do it because you have to do it. And then you've separated yourself, even in good works, from the Lord who loves you. So be free. Be free to walk the street and enjoy life. Be free to buy a new car. Don't worship it. Buy a house. Don't worship it. Buy me a diamond ring. I won't worship it. No. It's not easy to do what Christ asked. It can be done. He never said it was going to be easy. He never said the temptation won't get to you. But he said, I'll always be there. I'll always be your strength. Your girding up. So as you hear the word, you have to do it. You don't. We scream and shout in our television ads and stuff about now, now, now. And the only thing about now is that you need to know that Christ loves you now. And in the next now, Christ will love you. And in the next, and the next. So keep yourself free to love. Not to it or idolize. Because Christ loves you that much that he'll welcome you home every time. Amen. Here I am, Lord.